I'm John Janess, and this is an analysis of Cuphead. So Cuphead is a 2D platformer known for its difficulty. It has a heavy focus on boss battles with the occasional running gun level. Its art style is very heavily influenced by cartoons from the 1930s, as you can kind of see on the right. And it has won many awards, as well as selling over 1 million copies in just the first 2 weeks. So the storyline is that the game begins with this opening cutscene of Cuphead and Mugman. They're basically winning, and then they kind of make a risky deal with the devil. They end up losing this and are given a second chance to collect all of these different contracts from people that owe the devil. After beating all the bosses in the first world, they kind of start to get a new idea about fighting the devil instead of working for him. So I guess, how do you learn such a hard game? Gee, I wonder how. Through the execution of G's principles, the player learns the mechanics well and thus is always prepared for what comes next. The principles that I mainly talk about are fish tanks, customization, pleasantly frustrating, and well-ordered problems. So with fish tanks are used in several spots throughout the game. The first one we can see is the beginning tutorial on the top right, where they have to jump and they have to dash and they have to do all these things in order to progress through the game. And then most of the bosses in World 1 actually also serve as fish tanks, kind of stripping away all the other elements in the game except for requiring like 1 or 2 like basic mechanics. So for example, on the bottom right, that image is Goopy Legrand, and basically it really forces the player to learn how to dash. And once you can dash, then you can beat the boss. Pretty simple. Other ones like Floral Fury, for basic platforms that you're going to need later on, and then like Root Pack, simple jumping is what that helps with. With customization, the game is also really customizable by having like different weapons, abilities, and ultra attacks that the player can use. And they can also change the difficulty of the boss. You can see the difficulty settings in the bottom right, and in the kind of top right photo, you can see the shop that you get hovering one of the auto-aim weapons. So newer players are going to use like things like auto-aim, auto-parry, extra health, things like that. And then more experienced players, well, they're going to do stuff like this.
Inspired by State Farm's surprisingly great rates.
It's so cheap, yeah, got a great rate on the down low, 'cause Jake isn't your average Joe.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
This match will get red hot. Now go!
So as we can see here, on the bottom left corner, it looks like their weapons are swapping, right? And this is because this is a technique that they use. Notice here how a dash mechanic is a must. And so using things like auto-aim would be actually detrimental to this player because they wouldn't be able to do as much damage as they do. They actually skip the second phase of the boss, or the third phase of the boss. So I had to do this boss on simple, which is another a showcasing of how important this customizability is, because I couldn't even do that boss. Moving on, pleasantly frustrating and well-ordered problems. We can kind of see on the right here a boss tier list. Bosses in World 1 are all easy, and as you progress, the bosses get harder. So there's not a single boss in World 1 that's above somewhat hard. The hardest on there being Floral Fury. From before, we kind of know that problems are well ordered as the player has received training on the skills required to beat the stronger bosses. Remember the idea that the fish tanks of World 1 kind of provided that basic training for each level. One last thing to keep it pleasantly frustrating is the death screen, which we see on the next slide. The death screen kind of acts as like a progress marker to see how far you've made it in the game. And it shows the different check marks for how many phases you've been through. But anyways, by analyzing this game, we can see how Cuphead can be such a difficult game yet still be accessible. Following G's principles of fish tanks, customization, well-ordered problems, pleasantly frustrating, and many others, Cuphead creates the perfect learning environment for players of all skill levels to conquer, challenge, and master the many mechanics of this gloriously designed